Welcome to the Digital Marketing Insights podcast, brought to you by Brightside Digital.
Hi everyone, welcome to the show. I'm delighted to say we have Cian here today, who's a freelance writer and content marketer. How are you doing, Cian?
Not too bad, Tom. Thanks very much for having me on.
You're very welcome. Cian, we always start off the same. Could you tell everyone a little bit about yourself and your career to date, please?
Professionally, I guess I'm a writer who's kind of grown into the world of marketing to try and kind of get a fuller picture of things. Kind of wear a few different hats. My main gig at the moment is I'm working for 256, a content marketing agency in Dublin, as the content marketing manager for the agency themselves. And then I'm also a freelance copywriter who kind of specializes in the outdoor industry, cycling, brands, hiking, things like that. I do a bit of travel writing on the side as well. And I also take care of the marketing and brand management for Ilk, who are an Irish menswear brand.
And tell me, obviously, writing is your main skill, but tell me a little bit about what you've done in that space around that in a bit more detail.
So like I've kind of my first kind of real big project that I worked on writing wise was for the Discover Ireland website through 256. So I was working full time for 256 at the time on that, and that was kind of around basically when the pandemic first kicked off. Falch Ireland were relaunching their B2C website, all the kind of the travel guides, best places to go, things to do, and all that sort of stuff. So I was always interested in travel writing. I kind of first took an interest in it when I was living over in Canada, and I've kind of really wanted to kind of formalize that by working in marketing and learning all about that. And I looked out working with 256 because the CEO there, Karen, she is from a journalism background, so I was able to learn plenty about how to write from her, and then that kind of gave me the confidence to kind of try and pitch some travel writing stories to some papers and things like that. So my first one was for the Independent, where it was that time in the pandemic where you were allowed travel within your county, and I'm from Louth, so I decided to walk from the southernmost tip of Louth to the northernmost, which is over 100 kilometers. So that kind of combined all my kind of interests into one. So now I'm trying to kind of just keep the travel writing stuff going as well as kind of using what I've learned to write about my own interests, which is cycling, hiking, being outside, that kind of thing.
So just for everyone listening, Cian here, you obviously you like writing about traveling, but you have a lot of interest in cycling, photography, and outdoors adventure kind of content.
Yeah.
How have you worked out a network, and what do you use to stay up to date in those spaces?
So it's kind of, you wouldn't think it, but the outdoor industry is alive on LinkedIn. Uh, there's a lot of kind of there's a lot of kind of industry leaders on there who are very active, and it's not like the kind of the tech or the startup, the CEO kind of world where they're bragging about getting up at 4 a.m. and stuff. They're very kind of speaking quite plainly about the industry itself, the kind of the shortcomings of it, and where opportunities might be in terms of making the business side of things. Uh, and then for just generally in the industry, there's a lot of good people on YouTube as well who are kind of making those kind of short documentaries, movies, kind of really doing the whole kind of story side of things. So they'd be mainly the kind of the two channels that I'll be most active on keeping up to date with.
And in terms of campaign work, you've already mentioned kind of your initial work being on the independent stuff, but is there any campaign work or anything you felt you've made really successful in your career to date that you'd like to share with us?
So kind of one of the more prouder kind of copywriting jobs I had was working for an Italian bike company called Bianchi, and that was through an agency who kind of specialize in cycling marketing. So again, that was kind of my first real like kind of shiny name to have on my website. So they were launching their first ever e-bike, and like cycling in Italy is a very kind of sacred thing. You know, it was a lot of heritage brands. All the big brands kind of have been around for over 100 years. So to make the jump into uh, electric mountain bikes was a real kind of jump for them. So the kind of their whole brand almost kind of took on this new angle overnight. And yeah, I was writing stuff, and the copy I had went live, and then the next day, uh, their team writer from the Tour de France, he won like the first three stages. So that when you went to Bianchi.com, it was my copy was the first bit you saw. So I was really happy with that, and they were happy with it as well. It was included in their brochure, which is called like kind of coffee shop magazine almost, that was sent around to all the distributors around the world as well. So yeah, I was very happy with that campaign.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And is there anything when you're working with clients and you're producing great content? Is there anything you use reporting wise to show how the success of your pieces?
Uh, yeah, so like if I have access to the tools, I love getting into links because I think views and impressions and all those sorts of things are definitely important. But I think there's if you have backlinks and shares, I think that's a real mark of people have actually gotten that next stage of engagement with your work.
And looking at your general day to day work with software, is there any softwares or anything you use daily?
Oh yeah, like just as a writer, just there are two free ones that I use every day. Grammarly, I think everybody knows about that. So it's kind of just corrects your grammar, but and your spelling, which I'm really bad at. But just there's a caveat with Grammarly, like it's not always right. So you use it as a guide, as a kind of sometimes your ideas come out of you real quick and you're typing very quickly. It's nice to tidy up on that, but it's not 100% right the whole time. And the other tool I use is called Word Counter. Uh, so Word Counter, uh, basically it counts words and characters. So if you are kind of restricted to a very specific word or character limit, if you're writing a landing page copy, it's great. But just another little feature on that, if you scroll down the right hand side, it shows you words you've repeated. So that's great on longer form pieces where you can look at, say, the keywords that you're targeting. If it's there, you can then see variations of that. And you can also see words that you've repeated loads that you didn't mean to include so much. So yeah, Grammarly and Word Counter are definitely my two favorites.
Brilliant. And is there any particular areas you're looking to upskill or learn more about at the moment, and why?
Yeah, so like working freelance, especially if you want to kind of be a freelance, traveler or adventure writer, anything like that. Uh, there's not a whole lot of money in it, so I wanted to be kind of a one-stop shop where I can kind of come up with the idea, pitch the idea, write the idea, take photos of them at it, and then kind of take it from start to beginning, kind of all within myself. Uh, but there's kind of the one bit that's kind of letting me down a little bit is just like coming up with the idea is fine. I'm quite happy to do that the whole time, but proving why it's a good idea through data is kind of something I want to get into a bit more. So recently I've started going onto Google Trends in my pitches, and so say if I'm pitching a story about uh, skiing in Switzerland, I go back to the 5 years and I'll see that 5 years ago it had a little uptick around winter. 4 years ago, 3 years ago it stopped. 2 years ago none, and last year it would skyrocket. So there was a kind of a bit of a trend there. So I want to get more into that and much more succinct of here's an idea, and you mightn't like the idea, but the idea is not incorrect. There's a story that mightn't be for you, but that's kind of where I want to get with my pitching, and like that's kind of transferable to marketing as a whole. Kind of if you've got a business and you have a blog, and you might think, oh yeah, my customers want to hear about our production process. But if you can back that up with data, spent whatever it is, an hour or two proving that, then you might either save yourself hours on something that doesn't have that much of an interest, or you might reassess and say, oh, actually, this is a really big thing and we need to kind of put more time and effort into this.
Definitely, data is key. Like
Mm.
it's a big thing, and
Yeah.
probably linked slightly to that. Is there any parts in the digital industry that might be happening in the future or coming now that really excites you that you wanted to share with our audience?
Yeah. So, like, it's kind of just kind of selfishly, as a writer, I do think that the whole editorial side of things is going to get much bigger. I don't think we've seen anything of it really to kind of show its potential. Like, just from even recently, you're looking at the kind of the Twitter meltdowns and Facebook kind of losing loads of money. People have built their brands on these social media platforms, but you don't own it. That's just a completely rented thing. Like, Elon Musk could today decide to cancel Twitter, and then or to shut down Twitter, and then there's businesses, there's personalities, there's everything that's gone. So I think brands are kind of recognizing that you need to get your followers onto your owned platform, so like your email newsletter, your blog, and things like that. Uh, and there's one brand, Patagonia, in the outdoor industry, have been doing this for a while now. They've got a whole subsection of the website called the Cleanest Line, and it's all just editorial content about not so much their gear. Well, actually, not their gear at all, but more kind of like people who might wear their gear. So it's outdoorsy people who work in kind of environmental issues, highlighting stories. And again, it's an online magazine really. And I can see a lot of brands kind of moving towards that. So we're kind of getting away from the hygiene content, the kind of the 10 best things to do in wherever you are, and then
Yeah,
kind of more move it into here's a profile on this old shoemaker who's been using this technique passed down from the past couple of 100 years. So it's kind of moving more into that real storytelling kind of side of things. That's just a couple of layers deeper than just trying to target words for SEO.
that's really really well said. And do you think you have to follow those trends? Do you think it's important to be a front runner in that type of content, or
Uh,
do you think you just have to follow the trends? So, like you say, probably 5 6 years ago, the top tens and top 100 and those types of content were the easiest, quickest things to consume. BuzzFeed made a whole business on that kind of content. So, do you think it's important to follow those, or do you think it's important to add your own style from the off?
like, I think it depends on the industry. So if it's something that's been covered time and time again, like say in travel, if you're starting your own personal blog and you're talking about 10 best things to do in Dublin, doesn't matter if it's the best thing ever written about it. You're going to have all the other websites who just have better domain authority than you, who are just going to outrank you. So you're not going to make that splash if that's kind of your only route into it. So
Yeah.
in that instance, you might be better off and going and interviewing the guy who does the tours at Glasnevin Cemetery and doing a piece on that. So it depends on kind of who you are. And yeah, I think if you're been on the other scale of it, if you're one of these bigger brands who say, again, like in the travel industry, so say you're one of the bigger tour operators or kind of travel agents who have all that kind of you know best places to go skiing in winter or best winter sun things. If they then moved into the more kind of personal editorial side of things, they'd make a very big splash because they already have the following, the domain authority, the money behind it, and then they're going to stand out in a kind of crowded industry. So like, it just depends on who you are, where you're at, and ultimately the goal of your content as well.
I think some people that might be listening to this podcast, Kian, would love to know best ways of getting started to become a writer or a freelance writer, or even have a part-time role as a writer. Do you have any one-on-ones that you would recommend? Any websites or any processes or even like an article piece that you'd say, oh, this will give you a head start that you could help people out with?
Not in terms of sending them to an article that I think is very good, but it's just it's one of these things that anybody can say you're a writer or whatever. You know, there's no real like degree in writing. You know, like I know there's journalism and things like that, but in terms of being a writer, you have to write. So uh, if you've got no budget and no time, even just get onto a website like Medium and start writing a blog. You know, start like that's kind of where I started. I got a new backpack, and I reviewed the backpack, and you know, after a month or two in Ireland, anyway, on Google, my review was outranking the person who was selling it, who were Thule, who would be like a pretty big backpack brand, you know. So even just I had not only did I have an example, but now I had an example that this ranks on Google, and then going to Google Images for the same thing, and my backpack had 3 or 4 different images on it. So then you know I was able to show that I understood SEO, I understood how to write a review, I understand a backpack, you know, so I understand how to use Medium. So it was all these types of things just kind of come together. And then, you know, I went on and did more and more. And then all of a sudden, I've kind of have this little portfolio that I can send to people. And I was lucky enough that I was working at the time, and I was able to kind of just say to people, "Here, look, I'll do this for free, just to kind of to show that I'm interested, and to show that uh, even though I don't have a marketing background or a writing background at all, I want to kind of just show that I can do it." So that was kind of one thing that I had to do. Uh, but yeah, just kind of just get examples and just keep writing.
That's fantastic. And lastly, Cian, we always ask in the show this question, which is, if you could boil up one personality trait that you have yourself that you could pass on to others, what would it be?
Yes, I was saying to you before the call, this is kind of one thing that I'd struggle with, but I think I like to think that I'm kind of a relaxed person to work with, and that I have the balance of uh, being kind of relaxing, kind of to be around at work, but then also being able to kind of get stuff done, which without kind of you know really kind of setting the sirens off and getting everyone kind of panicked, you know. So I think, yeah, that's one thing that I think I might be okay at doing.
I absolutely love that. Cian, if anyone wants to get in touch with you, whether it's, freelance writing in the travel or cycling or the different industries you operate in, how can they get in touch?
Yeah, so my website is cianwrites.com, like writing, and then the same on Instagram and Twitter, and it's Cian Byrne on LinkedIn. And yet, even like I had people messaging me there during the week on Instagram asking me about bike routes. They're coming over from England on a biking holiday and asking me, you know, where would you recommend to go? So even if you want to do that, fire away.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much for being on the show, buddy.
Cheers, Tom.